If you're thinking about buying land in the next 2 years, you need to write this stuff down. I'm talking about Superfund sites. I'm talking about contaminated land. I'm talking about water that you can't drink. I'm talking about wells you can't put in, septic systems that just won't work on the property. I'm going to share with you a complete checklist of what I've learned. My name is Wayne Turner. For nearly 30 years, I've bought, built, flipped, and helped thousands of people with their real estate transactions, buying and selling land, residential property, multifamily, you name it. I just share that with you so you can have the confidence knowing that what you learn from me is from actual tried and true real life experience. So grab a pen and a piece of paper. You're going to want to write this down. To begin, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they don't do their research. You need to research that land, and you can start with one simple thing. It doesn't cost you any money. Get out and talk to the neighbors. People call me and say, Wayne, what's the flood zone on that property? Has it ever flooded? Have you ever had any issues with that land? And I tell people, listen, just because the seller told me it's never flooded, if you want to hear it from yourself, you need to go talk to the neighbors. Talking to the neighbors, ask them, has it flooded? What's the flood zone? Where's the survey? How do you like the neighborhood? Would you move back in here? How long have you lived here? Ask those types of questions. You'd be amazed what you learn just by talking with the neighbor. Now, after you talk with your neighbor, another one that's free is to find out if that property is a Superfund site, or if any property around the piece of land that you're about to buy is a Superfund site. S-U-P-E-R-F-U-N-D, Superfund. This is land that is deemed contaminated by the Environmental Protection Agency because at one point in time, there was probably some sort of manufacturing facility on that property. For example, there's one in Louisiana that's a creosote factory. It closed down decades ago. However, it's a beautiful piece of land that's 30 acres, that's completely fenced. And yes, the water that they pull out of that they test on a yearly basis, it's still contaminated. Now, I'm certainly not trying to scare you out of buying a piece of land. You just have to do your homework and make sure that what you want to build on your site, you can build on your site. So another free thing that you can do is find out what are the restricted covenants and the deed restrictions on that property. When a land is developed, it doesn't matter if anything's ever been there, the owner of that land, and it can date back decades, it can date back over 100 years, they've deemed deed restrictions, and those restrictions can say you can't raise pigs, you can't have chickens, you can't run a business, you can't build a house that's less than 1,800 square feet, or you can't put a double wide trailer. And that is free information. You get that information from your city, county, clerk of court's office. You can go there, give them the property address. They will gladly pull all of that information for you and make copies for you so you can know that you can do what you want to do on that piece of land. And look, while you're there, write this one down too. You want to get a copy of the survey. You want to make sure that where the property ends and begins, there's a survey. And once you have that survey, you want to walk that property. I know I told you to go talk to the neighbors, but you want to do more than just talk to the neighbors. You want to get out and walk that property when it's raining, when it's pouring down rain. Look, it's just a little bit of water. You're not going to melt. Get you a suit from Lowe's or Home Depot that's 20 bucks. Strap that thing on and go walk in that property. Make sure if there's any low spots. And you're also going to look for encroachments. Now, encroachments is when somebody's literally encroaching upon your property. And if they're encroaching upon your property that you're about to purchase, you want to make sure that that gets dealt with by the seller, not by you. Now, before I forget, if you don't mind, give me a thumbs up. Click that you like this information in this video. It helps me produce more videos and get more of the information and the word out there to people like yourself. You can also subscribe to the channel. There's no cost, no obligation. If you want more information, become a subscriber. You can also click that little bell right there, and that bell will actually give you notifications when we post new videos on a weekly basis. You see, oftentimes there's a large parcel of land, and believe you me, I could tell you lots of stories where the owner of the land didn't realize that the neighboring property had put a fence on his property. So once you do a survey, you walk the land, you can find out where the meets and bounds and the stakes are in the ground, because they'll drive big steel rods into the ground you can't even see. That's why it's important to have metal detectors. You can actually walk out there and find it with the survey. You can stake off the property, get permission, of course, from the seller to do this, but you do that within the contract. Once you've found that property, you've written the contract on it. That will tell you if there's any encroachments on the property. Once you find out those encroachments, the seller can take care of that instead of you having to take care of that. Now, some parts of the country call land as undeveloped or unincorporated, and that may be a piece of land that is just raw dirt. It may not have electricity at the street. It may not have water. It may not have sewer. It may not have natural gas. Some of that stuff may be at the street because those utilities run along the road. But oftentimes you'll have to bring in telephone poles to bring in electricity. And you'll oftentimes have to put in a well and put in a septic. But here's what you have to understand. You have to understand, is there a lot of rock around that soil? You want to look for cedar trees. If you see lots of cedar trees, that means there's probably a lot of rock in that soil. It's like driving down the interstate and you look up and you see all these cedar trees growing out of a rock. They're growing out of a rock because they don't need much water. They literally will grow out of a rock. And if they're growing out of your ground, there's rock. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not going to make or break anything, but you need to know that before you take ownership in that property, because that can make a difference in whether or not you spend $6,000 on a 400-foot well or say $12,000 or $13,000 on a 1,200-foot well. You also want to make sure that the property will perk. Perk means that the city, the county, they're going to come out, they're going to do a percolation test, and they're going to make sure that the fill lines within the septic system that you install, the earth will absolutely absorb that in a timely manner. And because if it won't perk, then that means it just sits on top of the ground. Oftentimes there's 13 to 15 types of soil in that ground, and they have to come out and make sure that it will absorb. If it won't perk, it gets real expensive to put an upgraded system on your property. Now, this is something that's really important. I've had people reach out to me and say, Wayne, I was doing all this research and the land got bought out from under me. You have a due diligence period. You have typically 10 to 14 days of which you make an offer to purchase that property that you can do all of this research. The last thing you want to do is do a lot of the research that may take you 10, 12, 14 days, and all of a sudden somebody else has watched one of my videos. They came in and make an offer on the property and thought, well, Wayne said there was a due diligence period, because they're right. There is a due diligence period of which you can do all kinds of research within 10 to 14 days. That means you do the research. You're telling them, I'm going to promise to purchase your property with a contingent upon these things. I want to make sure it perks. I want to make sure I'm clear with the survey. I want to talk to the neighbors. I want to do all this stuff. And then I'll give you the thumbs up. Now, you're going to put a deposit down. Typically, when you purchase land, 5 to 10% of the purchase price. $100,000 piece of land, you may put up $1,000 deposit. That's going to be your deposit as a down payment. You'll get credit for that at closing. And you'll want to also look into credit unions. Banks and credit unions are the best place to go whenever you're purchasing a piece of land. They're also going to want to have it appraised, because they're going to make sure that you're not overspending and they're not over lending on that land. Now, another one that's really important and people fail to get, people just fail to miss, is a title policy. A title policy is a one-time payment that you pay at the closing attorney, and they'll put a title policy. They'll run a title search. They'll make sure there's no back taxes, liens, encumbrances, and all of that, and you take ownership. But more than just a title search, you want a title policy, because the title policy insures you for the life of which you own that piece of property, and you only pay it one time. It's not that expensive. And here's how it helps. It insures you from the day you purchase that property for years into the past. So if anybody's ever done any kind of work, any kind of gravel work, there's a road cut in, there's anything that's been done with that property, it's going to cover you. No one can come knocking on your door, come walking across your property and claim that it's theirs, or that you owe them money for work that was done on that land that is now yours. And that also is going to be a tremendous help when you go to build on that piece of property. That way you know it's protected and it's all good and safe. Another thing that people always ask me is, Wayne, can I build on that land even though I still have a loan? Yes, you can. So do this. Check with the bank that's going to loan you the money and see if they have construction perm loans available. That's a loan where the loan does not have to be paid for. You can say put 10% down on the property. You purchase the land, then you can contract with a contractor, or in many states you're allowed to be your own contractor for your personal residence. At that point in time, they can give you what they call a construction perm loan. Now, it is a construction loan to build a home, and once the home is complete, they will roll that into permanent financing like a traditional mortgage. So you're borrowing money for the land, you put money down on the land, and then you're borrowing and building on that property. Once you're building on that property and that building is complete, you simply close just like you would a regular home and take ownership of it and start your payments. Now, if you want to know a secret to saving money when you buy a piece of land, is consider buying one with a house already on it. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I'm giving you a lot to think about, right? So when you buy a piece of land, with a house already on it, it's going to be far cheaper. This house is just under 2,500 square feet. To build that house right now is going to run you about $170 to $180 a square foot, pretty much wherever you are in the country. That's probably reasonable considering most places. This home, just under 2,500 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths on 9 acres of land, and it's $375,000. The kitchen's updated, it's got a big cathedral ceiling, it's got a stone fireplace. It's an absolutely beautiful home, and it's peaceful, it's quiet, you can move right in, nobody's going to disturb you, and you're going to save a whole lot of money. Now, your payment on something like that, if you put, say, 10% down on a $375,000 house, your payment's going to run you about $2,800 a month. Now, don't get me wrong, there's something beautiful and sexy, and it just smells so good about that new construction. I get it, but you just have to be prepared to know that it is costly to build a new home right now in today's economy. It's also important to know that there's fees, there's cost. I mean, literally just to put a well and a septic system in, most parts of the country, you're looking at about $15,000 to $17,000 between those two items. So you have to factor all of that stuff in before you jump into just buying raw land. I always tell people, when in doubt, it doesn't cost you any money to look and see and get a feel for the market to see what's out there, because you may just roll up on something that's on a quiet dead-end street like this one that absolutely meets all your needs. I'm Wayne Turner. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Most importantly, give us a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to the channel. I'll promise you, you'll learn something on every episode.